But the idea of a board of directors is to leverage the expertise of a group of people that are passionate about whatever that board is, or whatever that company or nonprofit organization is focused on, and be a sounding board. A lot of times there's a lot of Muslims that will come through from the different Islamic world, and we'll have some great conversations, and they have misperceptions about us. We have it about them, and what it all boils. This is the same conversation every time. And this is what they'll say and we say. What the media shows about you, what our media shows or what your media shows about you, is not true. We've witnessed that today, and we say the same thing. What our media shows about you or what your media shows about you is not even true. And so, but to sit at the table and to shake hands and to break bread together and to eat and just talk, that's where the peace process happens. I get a Facebook message from him. Can you help me get out of Afghanistan?
Are we as different culturally as the news makes us seem? Today, I get to sit down with Jake Hinckley. He is an educator by trade. He started in the education space, and now he works in a different way in education. But he serves on 2 board of directors, and one of them is very, very unique. Dive deep into this conversation and hear all about Jake's story. This is The Inward Mind. Welcome to the Inward Mind podcast. This is Billy M. Ward, and today I have Jake Hinckley. He is an awesome person. We've worked together with my video production company, and he's been in the education space and leadership, and he's an awesome guy. And every time I'm going to tell you this, and I added it in the questions, but the first time I met you, I was super impressed because I've been around a lot of leaders and leadership. I've been captains of the football team, put in leadership positions a lot, and I saw you and I met you, and I was like, wow, this guy, I like him. He's a good leader. I want to be around him. And so you came from the education space, and now you're in working in HR, doing education in a slightly different way than before. Can you kind of explain, how'd you get to there? What's your story of getting from the education space to where you're at now?
Yeah, so I call it my third career. So I wanted to be an educator. Well, both my parents were educators. My dad was an athletic director at a local high school, and my mom was an elementary teacher. And I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and I'm the only one that actually got into education. But I kind of, it was what I was exposed to, and I was just good at it. And so I absolutely loved going in and working with, I taught high school kids, and so I just loved to go in and teach them. And if I could blow their minds with something, get them thinking, and that was my big thing. I wanted to be the teacher that challenged them and their mindsets and kind of their perspectives. And so I just love to craft great questions that would just get in there. Oh, I thought this and believed this, but now that you asked that question, I think I need to explore over here. Anyway, so I was doing that, and after about 16 years in education, I had an opportunity. I never thought I would leave education. Both my parents retired in education, and that was my track. But I had a friend who was in the education technology space, and he reached out to me and said, hey, I need some educators to come and help me as a salesperson speak teacher. I can't speak teacher. Can you come and work with superintendents and principals across the United States and kind of help them integrate and implement our technology? And I thought, I'll go try it for a year or 2 and see how it goes, and just fell in love with it. And so did that for the next 6 years. And so worked with some of the leading educators at the state level and then at school district levels across the United States. It exposed me to a wide range of people very quickly over those 6-7 years. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, as with many things, it created a lot of chaos, and the ed tech industry got hit really hard. And so I had to pivot. And my little ed tech company that I was working for, a little startup company, and that's kind of the dream is get a SaaS company, get in, within the first 10 employees, and that if it explodes and you're one of those entry-level people or first-level people, you're going to make it big. Well, that didn't happen. And so I had to pivot, got let go, as did 3/4 of the workforce got let go. And I had to pivot into anything I could find. It was a pandemic. I got a family, and I had to feed them. And so I just looked at, okay, what's my skill set? And so leadership was one of those things. Technology was one of those things. And happened to know somebody who was working for a construction company, and reached out to the CEO. He introduced me, and we connected with the CEO of the company. And the very day that I got let go, I got a job offer because it was a skill set they didn't have in that construction company. And he's like, when do you want to start? I'm like, give me 2 weeks. I'll just take a little time off. And then got into the construction space doing education, leadership development, technology. And that was kind of my transition into there. And in fact, my former company in ed tech in the SaaS space, he reached out to me and said, hey, we're stable now. We're ready to have you, and you can bring some people back. And I said, I'm actually going to stay put. I really like this space. And so I was with that company for 2 years, and then a larger construction company reached out to me and said, we want you to come do those same things for us. And so I've been doing that for the last 2.5 years and just have found a spot for me. And it's a very unique role, and there's not a lot of people, if any, like me in the construction space. And
No way. My dad grew up, and you know my dad.
Yep, we worked together.
I've grown up in construction and doing all that stuff and being him around. Like, I've never met a person that has that kind of position. So when I met you, he's like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
This is a cool space. So what is determined? So you were in the ed tech space and you decided to stay within construction. What was that point where you're like, well, I don't want to go, like, what is the reasoning why you didn't go back to the ed tech space and you stayed in construction? Because two like completely different realms. Yep. And what was that decision for you? What made you stay there?
Yeah, and I'll be very transparent. The first thing is the money. Construction companies, I did not realize how successful and financially robust they are. I had no idea until I sat in those meetings and saw the numbers. And so I was working with these tiny ed tech companies, and they're struggling to hit, hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue each year. And that was the big goal, to try to hit this. Let's hit 500,000. And then I get to my first construction company, and they have millions that they're trying to hit. And I'm like, what in the world? And so that was the first thing. And so that's kind of a selfish reason, but I got to provide for my family. And so that's going to keep me there. But the second thing, and maybe it's more important, I really saw where I could have an impact. I saw incredibly smart, and I'm going to call them frontline leaders. So your foremans, your superintendents, and they're out in the field and they just do amazing things. Like all of our roads, our plumbing, our electrical, all this stuff is put in the ground by these tradespeople. And I love everything. I love to be able to flush my toilet, and I don't have to worry about anything. And so I'm so grateful for these people. But at the same time, that industry has kind of been stepped on a lot, and people and students in high school have been discouraged to go into those fields. Yet they're very lucrative, and some of the students, they love that. But one of the things I noticed is because of that, a lot of our field people, especially in those leadership positions, haven't had the personal professional development that other people have had. And they just didn't get it. School wasn't their thing. They didn't like sitting still. They didn't like they couldn't use their hands. That's how they think and do all that stuff. So when it comes to leadership development, they just didn't have those opportunities. And so now we say, all right, you were a really good heavy equipment operator or a pipe layer or whatever that was. Now you manage people. And they have no skill set to do that. And so how do they do it? They do it how it was done to them, which was a lot of yelling and cussing and pushing around, and sometimes there's physical altercations, and some of that still permeates. And despite these cultural shifts that have happened, this younger generation won't put up with that, and so there's a lot of recidivism because of that. We're churning employees, and a lot of that's due to the leadership capacity of these frontline leaders. And so what I see there is an opportunity, and this is me putting my educator hat back on. I want to go and influence this group because they're highly intelligent at what they do. They just need a little bit of help on the leadership, the people side, those soft skills, to help them be better leaders. And I truly believe that if we can improve their leadership, we will have better roads, better toilets, this whole infrastructure is going to be influenced by that. And I want to help that. And so that's a real major factor for me, is I can teach. So
you teach really well, and I've loved watching a lot of you working in the field and talking and having conversations with people. Has been cool to watch. Going along with that of helping train the old dogs, the kind of the new tricks thing. Yeah. How do you think with teaching the old dogs new tricks and the newer generation, how do you think leadership is going to shift? Do you think the old dogs are going to be pushed out, or do you think they're going to be willing to shift into the new way that leadership is going to form within the new generation?
It's hard to say, but I think you'll see a variety of things. I mean, obviously a lot of them are going to retire. They're baby boomers, and they're going to be retiring. And I don't know that they're going to make that transition. I take that back. I have seen some already get to that point. They're shifting. And I think a lot of it has to do with this younger generation where they're not, you have to approach them differently. They were parented different, they were schooled different. And so the old ways just don't work. And I think some of them who are wise will recognize that. And they're starting to shift. They might do it with their heels dug in, but they're shifting. But at some point, if you don't switch over to that new method, it's going to hinder the company. And it's going to be very noticeable. And that's one of the things we're starting to do is we're tracking the data. And which frontline leader is churning the most people. There's some problems there. So let's dive in. And we want to do a lot of coaching and supporting and development. But at the same time, the data doesn't lie. And so people vote with their feet. They vote to come into the company. They vote to leave the company. And if you're not paying attention to that overall, what I call the employee experience, how they're experiencing the company at every stage of their journey through the company, you're not looking at the data and you're seeing trends and adjusting. And if those frontline leaders don't do that as leaders, then they're not going to be in those leadership positions much longer, whether they get demoted or they're just going to get pushed out of the industry. And it's going to take some time. Yeah, I do believe that. But
I've worked in construction too. In my first jobs, and like dealing with the old dogs is kind of they get kind of stubborn and they're stuck in their ways. But I think there's some that really want to succeed and really want to like, okay, cool. The times are shifting. It's ready to go. And I think those ones will be around to be able to nurture and help the next generation, especially within like you said, building all the roads, the pipes, the electrical, everything that has to do with the infrastructure of the United States has to do with this construction. And it's just, I like that. The way that it's going is going to be fun to see.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see.
Yep.
Kind of along with that, when you're building a team, because you do a lot of team building, how do you pick the right pieces for team members? Like do you have to evaluate each piece, or where does that start when you're trying to build a team and pick a team to build something?
Yeah. I'm going to start kind of, let's just say letting somebody go. I think the biggest thing, and I think I can't remember who I heard, Simon Sinek or somebody talked about this, where you have to let go of your ego. Like you want to make the best hire, but I have interviewed people and they have interviewed so well. And it's like, you are perfect for this team. Then they get on the team and it's not the case. And so sometimes I don't trust the gut feeling because my gut says this person's like rock solid. And then they join the team and for whatever reason, they just don't work out. And so I still want to do the best that I can. But as soon as you recognize that, you got to get really good at either coaching and building people up. If they're coachable and if they're not, you got to get them out of there quickly. But one of the things I do is I really believe that we have to focus on people's energy levels. And did we hire them to do the task that actually energizes them? And if you think about it, we all have things that we can do that we don't even feel like we're doing. It's like, some people might call it work. We call it fun because it tackles some of our thinking preferences for how we solve problems or how we tackle tasks. And so it's not a struggle for them. It's like, yeah, let's work. And they'll work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week doing it because it's not work to them. And so the big thing is try to discover and help them discover, if they don't know, what are the tasks within that job that energize them. I want to get those people working on those tasks because then they're having a blast. They're engaged. They're going to be developing and they're going to be performing well because they're aligned to that. But the moment you put somebody into a position with tasks that don't engage their energy levels, it's drudgery. And you've probably experienced that in different positions throughout your life. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is hell. To be like, if I were to go to a hell and I had to do this, that's what it would be, whatever that is.
Yes.
And so like I had a job early on when I was in college, I was working at a mall at one of those kiosks, getting people to sign up for mortgage stuff. And it paid really well. And I thought, oh, I want that money. And then I actually had to go, and it felt a little bit sketchy. Like we were trying to get their information and doing this raffle type thing. And it was really just to get their information. And I was naive. And so people started to ask me, well, aren't you just trying to get my information so you can send me, mailers and all this stuff? And I'm like, I guess so. Like I really didn't know what they were doing. But as I started to read about all this stuff they were signing over with their contact information, I'm like, this is shady. And very quickly, I just couldn't do it anymore. Like it didn't energize me kind of on the moral level. But at the same time, I was like, I'm really not a salesperson. I'm a teacher. So to go up and try to get something. And so very quickly, I'm like, I got to find another job quickly. And so we all have those. So find what tasks energize people and then get them working on those tasks. And then things just work out. And one, I'll just add one more thing, is that, when you think of the brain, you kind of have four levels of thinking. You have your analytical, your conceptual, your structural, and your social. And all of those are important. And sometimes you're going to have team members that are more analytical, some are more structural, some are more social. So you got to find, because that's what energizes their brain. And so if you take somebody that their preferred preference for solving problems and tasks is a social, where they like to involve a lot of people and collaborate and all that stuff, and you have them working on a task by themselves, they're going to go bonkers. If you take somebody who's more analytical in their thinking and you're not giving them the data, the metrics, the research, and you just say, just kind of create it out of the air, they're going to get really frustrated. And so the key is to figure out what their thinking preferences are and kind of their behavioral preferences, what energizes them, and then to get them on those tasks.
Dude, it's true. I've been in many jobs. My first job in construction was, I didn't love it. I liked the money. The money was nice.
The money can sometimes carry you for a bit.
But I had to go. I was a pipe layer, so I had to go inside these big concrete boxes, inside some sometimes feet of water, and sit and take concrete and cut a pipe that's concrete, and then put all the concrete to make sure that nothing leaks into the groundwater system. Yeah. And that was the one part of my job that was like, I can't do it. So I understand finding the things that energize people. And I loved I'm one of the social butterfly kind of guys. I love working with people, but also I have my analytical side, but that side isn't as big as my social side. I love to be around people and talk to things. That's the one unique thing about my job, is sometimes a lot of the time I'm in the office by myself, but now I have a wife and 3 kids. So it's kind of okay, I have hit that little bit of socialness, but really quick,
let me just add one thing, is that, you talked about, I'm more social, and kind of the analytical thing maybe drains your energy. But one of the things that if you identify what your preferences are, you can actually leverage other people's strengths to compensate for your own. And so if you can help teams see that, okay, you're the structural thinker, you're the social thinker, you're the analytical thinker, you're the conceptual thinker. And if you got that team together and they recognize that, then they're going to start to leverage each other's strengths, and then you can see it from multiple perspectives. And so that's the most valuable thing. And so the fact that you recognize that, now you're going to hey, this is going to drain my energy. Who do I know that's more analytical? I want to bounce this idea off of them. And a social person is really good at that because they got the connections.
Yeah, and it's super nice. And I think building a team, that's why I like asking you that question. I think building a team is important for any kind of business. And that's kind of like I was talking about before the podcast, is I'm trying to shift over from just doing my own video production to doing something more in the YouTube and podcasting space, so that I can build a team that I want to work with, and not just we're here to just make money. I want to build something else. And we'll talk more about all the details of that afterwards. Yeah. Who would you say you like to listen to the most for leadership content? Because I know you've listened to Jocko and Simon Sinek. You listen to those a lot, and you went down to one of Jocko's things down in Vegas.
Yeah, Muster. Yeah.
Who's your favorite to listen to, and kind of why do you like to listen to them?
I don't know that I have there's a lot that I like to listen to. It really just depends on kind of what they focus on. And so you got Jock, who's focused on dichotomy of leadership and ownership, extreme ownership. And so if you want to talk those two things, he's the go-to person. But I mean, if I had to choose one person, I would probably say Simon Sinek is my go-to person. And it's interesting, when I first watched him present, when his videos first started coming up, I thought he was an idiot. I'm going to be honest, he just wasn't a good presenter. It just wasn't engaging for me. And I didn't give him the time of day. And then later on, he started to evolve a little bit and get better at that. And I went back and watched the earlier stuff, and it's true he wasn't, but the content was still the same. And I was able to absorb that a little bit more. But he's probably my go-to person. But I mean, I really just love to learn about leadership. And so whatever I come across, that's what I'm going to be studying, reading, listening to. And so it's all important.
Are you reading anything specific right now?
Yeah, it's a book called, now that I'm put on the spot, I won't remember. It's called Humble Inquiry.
Cool.
And it's about the impact. And this is one of the things that I feel like makes you a great leader. He talks about the importance of asking questions as a leader. If you're hiring people to do a task, you can just go tell them what to do, but then you've got to be there and keep directing. But if you hire the right people, and Steve Jobs said this, and it makes no sense to hire great people and then tell them what to do. And so you want to bring on great people who can just start running, and then all you have to do is start asking them questions about what they're doing and expand their thinking, and just kind of those questions give them a little nudging And if done in the right way, what you're doing is helping them unpack their thinking. The leader will see things that others may not see because of the position they're in. And it's super easy just to go and tell somebody what the answer is. But a lot of times people don't retain that. And this is the educator in me coming. I can tell my students exactly what to think. Is that the right thing to do? I don't believe it is. And so what I found is as a teacher, that if I ask the right questions, it gets the student's brain or the employee's brains working. They discover the answers, and answers in plural, and there's multiple ways to solve things. And then they retain that information a lot better because their brains were actualized. And so because of that, it sticks. And so whatever task you're having them do, they feel the ownership of it. They're engaged about it, and they feel like you trust them. And you're not doing it in a way to, challenge them. You're just doing it. And if you do that properly, so it's just a way to ask great questions.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to take a look at that. That sounds like a good book. I would say that most of my teachers, and I like that you tried to push those questions, was in the opposite camp. Like, let's memorize this and get this out of here. It's like, man. But I do remember the teachers that I used to go when I was in high school, where they'd ask the right questions and make me actually think. And then those are the classes I liked being in the most. I was like, oh yeah, I can think the way I'm thinking in a way that's actually problem solving an issue, or actually getting something done, instead of saying, hey, this is what you need to think. This is how you need to do things.
Well, and this is what's causing this shift. And this ties back to our frontline leaders needing to adapt their leadership styles. The education that you and I and our parents and maybe even some of our grandparents went through was more of an industrial model of education, where they're training people to work in the industrial world. They just need the basics of everything. But there's this whistle that blows at the beginning of the school day, a whistle that blows at the end. It's almost like you're in a factory, and they move students from these classrooms to classroom, very factory-esque, based on when the cadences are. And it's just, I'm going to tell you the information, you regurgitate it back to me or on the test. Don't do any thinking, just regurgitate it so I know that you've mastered it. Well, with the internet and now with AI, I don't need a teacher to get information.
It's true.
I don't need a teacher. I can Google anything. I can type it into AI, and it's going to spit it out to me. And so what's the teacher's job now? The teacher's job should be, I'm now going to help you take that information and to analyze it and to dissect it. And the good teachers do that. And so for these students to then go into the workforce where they're just being told what to think, they could still Google it. What they want is somebody that says, hey, what are your thoughts? What do you see? How are you going to interpret this information? And so there's a whole shift going on, and it's going to force everybody else to shift. The technology is going to do that. Yeah,
and so, AI is, it's crazy when, especially first when ChatGPT first came out, and I was like typing in stuff. I was like, write me a 5-page paper about the American Revolution, and it popped it out in like 30 seconds. And I was like, regardless of if all this information was true, if I had this in high school, being able to utilize that as a resource, I could do stuff so quickly just to get that answer thing done, just to get it done, just to check the box. Yep. But now it's like, wow, now you actually have to be teaching people how kids, especially, how to be thinking analytically in the way of, how do I analyze this information? Is it true? Because now it's getting even harder to tell if information's real or fake, and being able to research and do all that stuff too. So that's a crazy thing to think about, that technology is moving so fast that it's like, oh, right. Now we got to shift the way that we're teaching everybody and teaching students how to do what they do.
And I've been watching how educators are implementing, because I'm still a teacher. I'm watching how are they going to deal with AI? How are you going to deal with that with students being able to do that? And so what they're doing, at least in some cases, is they're saying, all right, your first draft of your paper will be written by ChatGPT. And you're going to turn in that first draft. I want to see it. And then you need to tweak it and make sure and verify all the information in there. And then you can go through however many drafts, but your final draft, and I'm going to compare the two. Cool. And so that's what they're basing it off. So they're incorporating it into their curriculum, but that's easy to do. And if people just did that, they're not going to be thinking.
Yeah.
Right. So, but now I'm going to say, now you've chat GPT'd it. Now the student has to go and read. That's a great skill. They got to analyze, they got to research, they got to make sure that everything in there is accurate. So you can use that as a great starting point for them. And that does save the students a lot of time in having to type everything out. Yeah. But now let's tweak it. There should be a lot of variation between the two that now demonstrates your thinking and refining of that information.
That's actually the most unique way I've actually heard of that, because that still, it's like just like reading a textbook. Now they make you You'll do the essay in Chat GPT. Now you have to read it, research it, make sure all the facts are correct. It's like reading a textbook, but the students are thinking about it slightly differently because it's written by an AI. I really like that. I'm going to look more into how teachers are handling the AI revolution, because I've seen that now that I've heard that from you, and I've seen other teachers like, if you do Chat GPT or anything, you're just going to fail and it's all that stuff. I'm like, you got to kind of adapt a little bit, because it's not going away now that it's here. It's going to stay forever, and we got to move and learn with the times a little bit of how AI is going to start changing the way that education has to go.
Yeah, any teacher that just isolates AI is delaying their students and their progression. It's the same with phones. I'd be observing teachers back when I was in education and a principal, and I'd hear teachers say, "Hey, put your phones away." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Get your phones out." As I'm teaching, now if I see you gaming, I got a problem with that. But you have all this information at your fingertips. As I'm teaching, you should be having ideas in your head, and I want you to be asking questions. Go research those questions, then share. And so let's incorporate the technology and all that knowledge to shape the discussion. And if teachers do that right, it empowers the students to use that technology for what I believe it was designed for. Gaming is fun, and I do have my few, kind of pet games that I play. But for the most part, it's to get that information so I can improve myself and my thinking and what I produce in society. So
that's great. That's great. I think I'm excited to see where that turns out to, and to see where education goes in the next 15 years. Because I have 3 daughters, and we'll see, and we'll go from there. The one thing I was on your LinkedIn, because you're always all over LinkedIn and posting and talking to people and all this stuff. And one of the things I noticed about your work history is you're currently serving on 2 boards.
Yeah.
And number one, I've asked some people some questions of this in the past and been kind of like murky water. Like, first question is, what is the purpose of serving on a board? And number 2, can you explain the 2 separate boards that you serve on? Like, what is the purpose and what do you do on those boards?
Yeah. And so, when people get to a certain point in their careers, they have a wealth of knowledge and experience. And so the whole concept of a board of directors, at least in this case, and one of them is a nonprofit, one of them is a government agency within the state, a state agency. But the idea of a board of directors is to leverage the expertise of a group of people that are passionate about whatever that board is, or whatever that company or nonprofit organization is focused on, and be a sounding board for them. And so as they have ideas about which direction to head strategy-wise, or with different offerings that they should offer, the idea is that who's ever running that organization can then leverage the expertise of the board to get that feedback. And so you'll meet quarterly, or however often the board decides, and you're just there to give expertise. And if they need help, a quick, hey, we need a quick impromptu meeting, let's get that set up. Here's what the trouble that I'm going with. We need to raise more money for this, whatever. All right, who has connections? Let's leverage your networks. And I guess that is another thing, now that I say that out loud, is a lot of these people have vast networks. And so if we need to tap into those, we can. And so the first board that I'm on is probably the one that I'm most passionate about. And if I could go work for them and they would pay me what I wanted, I would just go. But I volunteer for them. And so it's called Utah Global Diplomacy. And I've been volunteering for them for about 12 years. And then 2 years ago, they asked me to be on their board of directors. But essentially what they do is they host international diplomats from around the world. They come for different learning purposes. So they might come from Saudi Arabia to learn about separation of church and state. And it's sponsored by the U.S. State Department. So they'll come into Washington, D.C., and they said, okay, we're going to send you to Utah, to Texas, and to Mississippi to learn about whatever the proposed learning is for that. So it could be about higher education. It could be about secondary education. It could be about running nonprofits, whatever it is. These international diplomats come, and they get sent out by the U.S. State Department to the various states. So Utah Global Diplomacy is the nonprofit arm of these connections to the U.S. State Department that then helps create the day's experience. So they'll be here 3 to 4 days. So they'll call the universities, they'll call the businesses, they'll call whoever arrange the meetings. And then part of that experience is we want them to have a cultural experience. And so they'll arrange as well extracurricular stuff, going to listen to concerts or taking them up the canyon to see the ski resorts or to see snow for the very first time in a lot of cases, And so we started out hosting people at our house, and we've had people from pretty much every country in the world has been to our house for dinner. It's typically 2 or 3 diplomats. We have an interpreter in most cases, and so we'll have very candid conversations. And so we'll have people A lot of times there's a lot of Muslims that will come through from the different Islamic world, and we'll have some great conversations, and they have misperceptions about us. We have it about them, and what it all boils. This is the same conversation every time. And this is what they'll say and we say. What the media shows about you, or what our media shows, or what your media shows about you, is not true. We've witnessed that today, and we say the same thing. What our media shows about you, or what your media shows about you, is not even true. And so, but to sit at the table and to shake hands and to break bread together and to eat and just talk, that's where the peace process happens. So I'm a firm believer in that, and I don't care who it is. And I remember when we started to do this, people would see, like, they would come in full, like the Saudis would come in their full Saudi garb and walk in, and my neighbors would be like, what is going on? With these imams coming in. Yeah. And then they're asking me, like, what's going on? I said, we're just hosting some visitors. And but the biggest thing, and for me, it's one of the things I'm most passionate about, is breaking down those barriers, and it's the fastest way. If I can get to know that person and their backstory, and they get to know mine, we're going to have peace a lot faster to do that. And then the second reason for me is just I have 3 boys, and they sit there and they participate in this. I want them to be global citizens, and I want them, and I call it popping the bubble. I grew up in one little area, and my bubble was very small. And I didn't have the internet, and we didn't have a lot of things. And so I just want to make sure that my kids see that there's a larger world out there. So that's the first one. The second one is called Talent Ready Utah. And this one ties into my employment as well, where we're trying to bridge the gap between what goes on in school and what's happening in the industry. And a lot of times teachers who've been in education their entire careers, they don't understand what it's like for a student to go get a job, because they've been in their profession, that's all they know, and they're not going to do anything else. And so it's hard for them to relate to or prepare students for the actual industry, because they're kind of living in a bubble in a way. And industry, they don't speak teacher very well. They don't speak education very well. And so the idea is this Talent Ready Utah now serves as kind of this intermediary to bring these two together, to bridge that gap, and to help say, oh, you have students, future employees, you need those employees. What can we do to help you come together? And can we create job shadowing experiences? Can we create internships, apprenticeships? Can we do all these things to help these students get into careers and exposed to careers a lot earlier? And that's kind of the big word, is exposure. Mm-hmm. In high school, I wasn't exposed to a lot, but what my teachers did, or what my parents did. And what did they do? They were teachers. So what did I do? I became a teacher. That's what I was exposed to. Now, had I been exposed to Utah Global Diplomacy, I would have become, my passion, what energizes me, I would have become an international diplomat. I would have went and worked for the U.S. State Department or for the FBI. And I didn't even know that stuff existed. That's how tight my bubble was. And so I like that organization for that regard, is that it exposes these kids and gives them opportunities to dip their toe in the water with these different industries, to say, yeah, I like this, I don't like this, I want to do that. And if they can discover that before they get out of high school, then all the better, that they can head down that career track, or maybe even start that in high school. Like, when did you get interested in videography? Was that in high school, or was it after?
It was actually in high school. That's when I started. I took a photography, and I had a video class that I really enjoyed. And I've always had cameras and stuff that I always was taking around with me and taking videos and photos and doing all that stuff. So I've always had an interest in video and photo. But the school I went to was in Harriman. It was Harriman High School when it first opened. So it's like brand new school, not a lot of different classes, variations, things like that. So it's like I wasn't exposed to the fact of I could have done this, because the reason why I probably didn't go straight to film school is I didn't want to go do all of the stuff. I'm like, I don't want to go do, if I'm going to go do something, I want to go do that. I don't want to go do all of the extracurricular, like I have to go do 3 years of other stuff I don't want to do to get to the thing I want to do. Yeah. So I'm just like, I'll just go do something else that I can just go directly into. And I had no idea that I could have started my own video production company without having to do all of that, right? And a lot of the stuff I'm self-taught, and I've taken some online courses to kind of like advance my skills. But yeah, I was introduced in high school, and I wish someone would be like, hey, you can actually do that. You don't have to, because I went to college, and I finished a couple of years of college, but I didn't get a degree. But I I wish somebody would have told me, like, I could have gone straight into video and I
would have saved some money,
saved myself a
some
bunch of
time.
money and time. And I would have been like, oh, I would have been 5 years or probably 4 years faster than where I'm at now. And yeah, so that would have been cool to have somebody expose me to what I do now before when I was still in high school. I want to kind of circle back a little bit to the diplomacy side that you're doing with the first board that you're on.
Yeah.
I think that's such a cool, you made a statement where you said, hey, what the news media, our news media, your news media makes you look like it's not true. I feel like that's like one of the biggest statements that people should recognize, especially in like this very like politically like polarizing era that we're in right now. It's like a lot of the stuff within the media is poising people as like they're way worse or way better than they think that they are. But like if you sit down and have a conversation with your neighbors or have a conversation with somebody else from a different country, they're not as bad or not as good as some people even poise out. It's like you have to actually put in the effort to work in and have those conversations with people instead of being like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you are. I know exactly who you've been. Like we live in Utah, and if your neighbor's like, well, what is that walking in their Saudi garb? That's Utah in general. Utah is a bubble. Like it's such a huge thing where people don't know much about other cultures. But I think that's what more people need to do is sit down with other people with different cultures and have better conversations. And that was one of my things. When I worked in construction, I was around a lot of guys who spoke zero English and a lot of Spanish, and it was so much fun. And we got to the point in time where we were working together and be able to communicate and have a good time, and it was fun. I had a blast. I worked on a couple of those crews for a couple weeks at a time. And for me, I was like, whoa, I don't speak any Spanish. I'm going to feel like I'm way out of place here. But by the end of it, we were all, even though we didn't speak much of the same language, we still had a bunch of fun and knew exactly how to have a good time together with two completely different cultures. So
here's the metaphor I like to use. So I did my undergrad in Hawaii and actually studied international cultural studies. That was because I found that in college, and I'm like, I don't know what I can do with this. And they didn't even tell me. It was a new degree, but I just knew that it energized me. And so I'm like, I don't know where this is going to lead, but I'm going to do it just because it makes me happy. And so, looking back, I would have double majored in like business or something, but I'm glad I did it. But one of the things, so living in Hawaii, they have several local restaurants and that serves Hawaiian food. And one of the plates, that they call it a plate lunch is what it's called. But if you research the history of a plate lunch actually started, and it's a combination of a variety of different things. You can order a chicken katsu, which katsu is a Japanese meal. Well, there's a huge Japanese influence. You can order this type of meat or that type of meat, and it was influenced by the Portuguese or by the Filipinos, because all these different cultures came together in Hawaii to work in the pineapple fields. They couldn't speak each other's languages but a little bit, and so English became kind of the common language, but that's where Pidgin kind of morphed out of, this Hawaiian Pidgin dialect. It kind of takes these words, and we got to be able to communicate in a way. But one of the things they would do is they would gather together and they would say, hey, I've got this, it's my traditional food, I'm going to share it with you, and I'm going to share this with you, and you that with me. Well, let's just turn this into a plate lunch. And so it became this plate lunch. And so that's what I'm trying to do with myself is I want to experience all of these foods, all of these cultures. And one of the reasons I love doing that, because it helps me analyze myself. I start to think a certain way, and then they challenge that thinking. They're not doing it intentionally, but they share something like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Or they share something like, we actually agree on that. Like one of my, so I'll just share this quick story with Utah Global Diplomacy that I had. One of the visitors came. His name is Faiz Muhammad Mirzazada from Afghanistan. He was a provincial governor, came over with the delegation, came to our house, had a meal with us. We hit it off. We became Facebook friends. Several years later, this is when the Taliban started to take over. The U.S. was pulling out. The Taliban takes over. I get a Facebook message from him. Can you help me get out of Afghanistan? And I'm like, what are you messaging me for? Like, I'm a nobody. I reached out to a friend at Utah Global Diplomacy. She said, have him call this number. So I said, I don't know if this is going to work, but call this number. And then I get another message like 2 weeks later. Jake, we're out. We're in Germany. And then a couple of days later, Jake, we're headed to, he went to Qatar to Germany. Then he was in New York. And he messaged me, I'm in New York now with my oldest son, but I had to leave behind my wife and my other 5 kids. And then I said, where are you headed? He's like, I'm coming to Utah to be with you, my friend. And I'm like, okay. And so let me know when you're at the airport. And so like 5 days later, he showed up in Utah. And I picked him up. We got him connected up with the Catholic Refugee Services. We got him connected up with some other people, got him a house, got him all situated. And then we started to work on getting his family here, which took about 2 years to do. But there was such a connection. And I said, why are you coming to Utah? And he just said, you just treated me so well. And I'm not saying this to brag, like we just hit it off. And sometimes there's people you meet and you just click. And he and I clicked. And so while we were trying to get his family here, we started to go around and give some presentations to people. And we called it a Mormon and a Muslim. And as we got to talk to each other, there were certain things that we were very much similar on. No alcohol, the importance of the family. And so we started to lock into these foundational things. And it's like, we're hitting it off on this. And then he'll joke and like, oh, you don't drink coffee? I'm like, you don't eat bacon? Like, there's certain things that are differences, but we start to laugh about it. And, it's not, there's this tension thing. And so, but in talking to him, I just realized you cannot lump everybody in one group together. You cannot do that. It doesn't matter what religious background they have, whatever their political affiliation. There's so much variety within each one of those that you just can't do that. And until you start to meet people on a face-to-face, one-on-one level, you don't see those nuances. But as soon as you do that, they do. And then one last thing about this story. So he, about 6 months ago, it was 2 years. We still haven't gotten his family here. And he's like, Jake, can't you just call one of your senator friends and have them bring my family over? And by this time, his family had fled to Pakistan, and they were hiding out there in Islamabad and waiting for whatever. And they were just in hiding because the Pakistanis didn't want them there. No. And so I'm like, well, I know where our two senators' websites are. So I went to their websites, both of them, and they had an email thing, submit a issue. I wrote to both of them. One of them replied back within 24 hours with a PDF, multiple PDF documents. Have Faiz fill out these documents. I'm like, okay. So I sent him to Faiz, fill these out for all of your children and your wife, and sent them back. He got them all filled out. We sent them in. And then I asked the lady, is this really going to do anything? It was like the assistant of the senator. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you never know. And I'm like, okay. So I said, all right, Faiz, I got them submitted. We'll see what happens. And then like 2 weeks later, he gets a phone call. They've got their visas.
Cool.
And then just right after the new year, they all showed up. And he ended up moving to Virginia because his Afghani tribe, there's a majority of them in D.C., and so he moved there, and his family's all here now, all of his kids.
Cool.
And they're adjusting to the United States and just loving it. And so, but my favorite thing is he'll call me out of the blue, and he'll just say, Jake, my friend, I love you. I miss you. You're my brother. How's your family? And it's just so fun to talk to him. But that happened because of that connection. Yeah. And that's just invaluable. And to me, I'm going to tie that to leadership too, because every person you meet, they're going to have a different backstory. And so if you'll take the time as a leader to get to know them and build that trust, when you do have to ask them to do tough things, they're going to do it. And so, it's been a fun experience with Faiz, and I hope I have more of those. So,
yeah, that's awesome. I had a couple more questions. I have one more question, but so we can end this up soon. But where do you see your leadership going from here?
Yeah,
I know you're working in construction now. Do you see yourself working in construction in 10 years, or where do you see yourself going? Do you want to do like more speaking arrangements? Do you want to see more? Now that I'm hearing the international, that was the first thing news to me. More international relations, things like that. Where are you going to move to with your leadership journey?
Yeah, I do want to get into consulting. I mean, that's really where I feel, and especially on the people side of things. I've developed some frameworks and different things with just the whole employee experience, and I feel like that's crucial to any company to get a handle on. And I think some companies do it better than others, but it's something that it's going to be more and more needed as we move forward. And so I want to get into consulting. I'm always doing speaking engagements all the time, and I always love to do those. And that's where I feel most comfortable. Get me on a stage, let me talk about whatever, especially if it's about like diplomacy or cross-cultural, interactions, things like that. But that's what I see myself doing. But in the end, in 10 years, if I'm not in Hawaii, surfing and then traveling and speaking, like that's my end goal is, and I have, so my youngest boy is 13, so he'll graduate in 4 years. And so by the time he graduates, I like where I'm at right now is for at least 4 more years, nice and stable. But as soon as that happens and he's gone, and then who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
crazy. Life moves fast. That 4 years is going to fly by. That's for sure. Now that I have my oldest now is 5.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that's a crazy thing. So those 4 years will fly by. Where can people find your stuff? I know you're heavily active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me. Just LinkedIn, search me up, Jake Hinckley. And I love to connect with people. I'm a big networker. And if you're looking for a job, in construction, let me know.
Yes. Lots of good stuff. Oh, I'm actually very curious now. This is the question. There was a story on your LinkedIn, 6-man machetes in a banana field.
Yeah.
Give me that little quick rundown. Just
so I was a missionary for my church in Ecuador, a small little country in South America, and they're one of the largest producers of bananas in the world. And most of your bananas, if you buy them in a store, it'll have the little Chiquita sticker that says Ecuador. You'll see some other places, but Ecuador, you'll see a lot. So in one of the little towns I was in, we spent a lot of time just doing service for people, building houses, digging trenches, whatever, helping people out. And so we were just out in these remote parts of these banana fields. And before we knew it, we were surrounded by 6 guys, my companion and I, my buddy, and 6 machetes. They encircled us, and they said, give us everything you have. And we're like, we're missionaries. We don't have a lot of money. And we had, they were using sucres at the time in Ecuador. And so we pulled out like 500 sucres, which was, maybe a couple dollars. It wasn't that much. And we handed it to them. And they said, give us your backpacks. We want your backpacks too. And so I looked at my buddy and I'm like, I've only been here a few months and I really like my backpack. He's like, you've been here like in country, like a year and a half, and your backpack's nasty. Why don't you let's ask them if they'll just take yours. And so we did. We said, how about his backpack? We negotiated with them. I don't know what we were thinking. But while we were doing that, we started to talk. Do you think we can outrun these guys? And we're looking at them, sizing them up. We're like, I think we can just outrun them. Do we dare? Do we just want to try to outrun them and not give them anything? And so we're talking in English. They don't know what we're saying. And so we would then talk back to them in Spanish and say, this is what we're willing to do. We'll give you his backpack, and you can have everything in his backpack, which it was just filled with books. And so they agreed to it, and then they started to walk off. And then they started to, you could see them kind of, wait a second here. They still got stuff. And we were both very tall. They didn't want our shoes. They didn't want our pants. We're just, wouldn't even fit them. But then we could see them. They stopped and were like, we want his backpack. And then my buddy, I'm like, let's get out of here. And we just booked it and ran as fast as we could. And I kept my backpack. And we got back to the bus. He's like, he was still ticked off. I liked my backpack too. And why'd I have to give him my backpack? And I said, I don't know, but you did, and we're safe. And I still have my backpack, so let's go buy you a new one. But anyways, we escaped it. We had run-ins like that all the time.
Crazy. In
Ecuador. But it was for a young 19-year-old, it was an incredible experience. And that's what really popped the bubble. That was the first time I'd been on a plane, the first time I'd been out of the country. And now I am immersed in this new culture and having to learn their ways and learn their language and try to connect with them. And it was just an incredible experience that I wouldn't trade for the world. But that's where the bubble was popped. And it's like, well, how big is this world? How many different people are like this? And so there are still certain foods and there's certain smells and sounds that I hear. And it's like, that's Ecuador. And it just takes me back there, because after 2 years there, you just become very much like, it just becomes part of your life. And I got to the point where I didn't remember, like, everything in my pre time in Ecuador was just almost like a dream. And I just couldn't remember anything different. And it was amazing. And then to come back and be like, man, I don't even know if I can speak English anymore. And so just a riot. But yeah, machetes all over the place.
Yeah, I saw that when I was making these questions. I was like, wait a second. I'm really curious about that story. But
I wish I could say like I got hacked up and I got some cool scars, but
hey,
I ran away. I ran away. So
cool. Well, Jake, dude, thanks for coming on the podcast and sharing all your stories and all your knowledge. It was great to have you on.
Thanks, Billy. Yeah, good to know you.